I've told this on here before, but here goes. When I was 7 or 8, my family moved into a brand new house in a DC suburb. New construction, brand new everything. I was terrified in that house. I couldn't stand to be alone upstairs, even in the daytime. It just felt like I wasn't alone. My bed would rock back and forth as if someone was standing at the foot of it, pushing it back and forth. My sister would hear knocking on the bottom of her bed. I'd feel someone watching me from the top of the stairs. This continued until I moved out for college. I moved back home after dropping out of college and lived in the basement. My then boyfriend was staying over one night, and the light in the living area came on its own. After we turned it off and closed the door opened on its own. He refused to stay over after that. A few years later, my then boyfriend and I were married and living 8 hours away. I was very pregnant and went to DC to see my mom. My dad was away on a business trip, so it was just her and my younger sister in the house. I was lying on the couch and my mom was at the grocery store when I heard the creaking of someone coming down the stairs, and in the reflection of the glass over the fireplace, I could see bare feet standing at the entrance of the living room. Assuming it was my sister, I told her to come give me a hug. The feet turned and walked towards the kitchen. I got up and went through the other side of the living room to greet her, and there was no one there. I then remembered that my sister was at work. My parents have since retired and moved away from the DC area, and I haven't been to that house since. I'm living in a farmhouse built in the 1800s with my kids now, and don't feel as nervous and uncomfortable as I did back then. I still feel like, I don't know, maybe it just had high EMF frequencies there or some kind of explanation for what I experienced, but I just don't know. My first was when I was 3 or 4. Very old house, might have been a shack added onto over time. One of those houses that is way too close to the road because it was built when carts ruled the road. Anyway, I've never been an easy sleeper. Even at that age, it would take me hours to fall asleep. Like, they'd put me to bed at 8 or 9, and I'm still up when Johnny Carson is on at 11:30. Saturdays, I'd sneak and watch SNL from the stairs. I had recently graduated to a twin-size bed from the toddler bed. It was higher off the ground, and for some reason my Nimrod father insisted on setting it up long ways against the wall. So now I can't fall asleep, and my pillows kept falling off the back of the fucking bed. So I'm laying there trying to fall asleep, pop my head up to readjust my pillow, and there were 2 fully formed, like bright white silhouettes of people leaning over the foot of my bed. It was just a moment as my head was coming down, and I popped up again to see if it was real, and they were coming even closer, like reaching for me. I simultaneously screamed, nothing came out, pulled the covers up, kicked back and fell off the back of the bed. I couldn't speak or cry, so I started banging on the floor for my parents. My father came in like, "What the fuck?" I was mute, screaming nothing, like the wind knocked out of me. Probably the most terrified I have ever been. To this day, the image of these 2 specters is burned in my head. They ended up getting me a headboard for the bed and eventually swapped bedrooms with me. They said it was so they could have the room with more closet space, but I'm pretty sure it was because I wouldn't even play in there, and became even more of a pain in the ass at bedtime. By the way, the bed belonged to my great-grandfather, if that has any connection. He probably died in it too. It was the 70s, and we were poor. My first sleepover was at my friend's house in the 7th grade. We lived in eastern Kentucky in the Appalachian Hills. Her house was 40 minutes up a 2-lane winding road. Her grandmother lived in a Civil War-era house on the property, and her brother was in a trailer right beside it. The whole property is a field with hunting dogs in their cage outside and motion lights on every house or driveway. I was terrified of being somewhere so rural and quiet. I was so restless it drove my friend crazy, so she decided to visit the grandmother and I nervously followed. That night, her older male cousin was playing the piano in the living room there at Grandma's. It was probably 11 p.m. and I was looking out the front door window. I asked, "What if someone just randomly appears on the porch?" The cousin goes, "I'd jump through the back window and make a run for it." I laughed and continued to look out the window, trying to convince myself that it's not possible because the nearest neighbor was 2 miles away. All of a sudden, a man appears in a dirty gray shirt and overalls with work boots. He was extremely tall with broad shoulders. He was covered in soot or dirt. His face and everything, I was shocked by how dirty he was. His face was unhappy or disgruntled. He appeared at the far end of the porch and his steps caused the whole house to shake. He passed the door and we made eye contact, and he crossed the whole front of the home. I felt in my heart he heard me ask that questions and decided to show himself. We hear him stalk around the house on the porch and step off where we hear knocks on the side of the house like he was hitting it with the side of his fist as he walked by. The cousin grabs a shotgun and tells us to go to the bathroom and lock the door. We call the parents crying and family start showing up. The parents from the main house and brother are there in seconds. They should have passed him or seen him. We were in a large open field with motion lights, but nothing was set off. The dogs should have alerted. They look everywhere and find nothing. No footprints, no trail, no cars had come through. The grandma mentions how she's seen this man before in her room and how he tells her about how her time is coming. Me and my friend go back to her house where I cry and pray for the rest of the night. Went home the next day, sleepless and petrified. We had more sleepovers, and I never felt, and will never feel safe on that property or any of the houses. It feels like you immediately enter a horror movie plot when you go there. When I was a little kid, I told my mom that an angel would visit me in my room at night. She asked if it looked like my dad who recently passed away, and I said no. She was a little uneasy about that. I don't really remember this, but it's spooky. I do remember one night I complained to her that something was knocking on the ceiling in my room. She came in and heard it, and it must have weirded her out, so she told me to come sleep in her room. She got extremely spooked when the knocking started happening in her ceiling after we had settled into bed. I remember we got up and sat in the living room and watched some TV in the middle of the night. When I'd be home alone, I'd hear rustling in other rooms or in the hallway where we kept our VHS tapes. They have a very distinct sound when you move them around. A lot of those were my dad's tapes. The freakiest thing is the old house I moved out to 7 years ago. I had lived there about a week and my roommate left on vacation. I invited a random guy to my house after a night out and we're drinking beer. He asks to use the restroom and I tell him where it is. When he came back, he asked if I had a roommate and I was like, yeah, why? And he said, I think she's looking for you. And I'm like, what? My roommate is out of town. And he said, there was a woman at the bottom of my stairs looking for me. I ran out to see and there's nobody there and my deadbolt at the bottom of the stairs was locked. I've had friends stay the night who I've never told this story to who said they saw a woman in my house in the night. Unfortunately, I've never seen her. When my daughter was 4, we were driving up a hill and stopped at a red light. Below the hill was an old cemetery. My daughter asked, hey, who are all those people and where are their feet? She then asked why there was a lady on the bench crying. This cemetery was empty. We didn't make a big deal about it, and eventually forgot about it. Later, she would ask who certain people were that were not there. She saw people walking around outside and would get frustrated when we would tell her we didn't see anyone. As she got older, these incidents would happen less and less. When she was 6, I brought it up to her and she didn't know what I was talking about.
Like, share, and subscribe. If you got videos or stories to share related to the paranormal, then do send them to us on this email.